there's a lot of routines in here. Like, I have a lot of routines because I feel like kids respond to knowing how things work. Like, don't just hand me your paper. Put it in the turn-in tray. Because if you hand it to me, I might lose it. If they know what to expect, if they know what their hour is going to look like on a daily basis, we're going to have some discussion, maybe do some notes. We're going to do an individual or a partner assignment. Like, I think it creates a comfort level because there's routine, and for so many of these kids, they don't have routine. I mean, when I walk by other classrooms and it's like crazy loud, like, I think loud can be good. I'm all about conversations at the appropriate time, and those conversations should sometimes be loud. But I think sometimes it's loud because it's chaos. There isn't a routine, or the routine just, like, the teacher put a routine in place and then has given up. And I've done that plenty. But I hope they respond differently. I don't feel like my room is chaos, and I know some rooms are. So probably yes. For a long time, I let kids choose their groups, and I don't have to listen to them complain. I don't have to take time at the beginning of the hour saying, here are your groups. So it took me a while to get to the sheets. I did the sheets last year. For a couple of years before that, I was making groups each time, and I tried to rotate them, but I didn't want to be like taking 5 minutes to be like, here's your group, and then they would not listen, and I would have to repeat it. So then I was posting on the screen, like, here are the people in each group. But there was so much upfront time, seating them in groups, telling them at the beginning, you are in this group, you're in it for a few weeks, manages a lot of, like, it takes a lot of, like, waste time out. And I don't have kids typically saying, can we work with our friends? They just know that this is the way that it is. And they, I think, do their work because there's not this, like, pressure from their friends to be off task. I think that the groups encourage a culture of thinking. I find myself, I haven't done it in here yet. I mean, we just did, like, their first set of notes today. But I do find myself sometimes in the middle of notes stopping and saying to them, I want you to stop and think about that for a second. Because I really want them to understand that the stuff we talk about here happened to real people. And, like, to do that, you have to stop and, like, digest it a little bit yourself. Like, what would I do in that situation myself? And so I think just basic, like, that basic, like, let's pause here and think helps. And I think having the sheets on the desks and saying, these are ways we can think. I know you weren't here yesterday, but with the Gettysburg Address, like, we had them read it. They read it 3 times. And so for each time, it was like, look for words you don't know, then summarize, then make connections to the core democratic values, like encouraging them to think in different ways. The metacognitive logs, telling them, like, you need to be aware of what's going on in your head. Were you here when I talked to them? This might have been Friday. It was Friday because I talked about metacognitive logs that day. And someone in AP had not done his reading for Thursday, or I thought he hadn't for the fishbowl. And I asked him Friday morning, why didn't you do it? What happened? And he said, well, I read it, but when I read, like, I don't write stuff down. Talk to the text. Distracts me. And I said, you need to talk to the text because I know you're thinking. Or I think he said, I don't think when I read. And I was like, that is not true. Yeah. If you understand what you're reading, you are thinking. So you need to start writing it down to keep track of that, to make yourself aware that you are thinking. So I think I'm trying to encourage them in a whole lot of ways to, like, think, not just memorize names and dates. Like,
yeah, and I think the thinking like a historian
poster
and handout is great because you can highlight, like, we want to focus today was turning points. Like, let's focus on turning points. Turning points are a thing that historians have to look at. We're not going to just memorize a list of turning points.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about, like, we're going to have a discussion, like, what are some turning points?
Exactly. And that's a concept like they're going to use through the whole year. We're going to apply it. And I think like, I mean, if you're a person in the world, knowing what turning points are and being able to look for examples of those could be helpful in your life. Like, you might come up to a point in your life where you're like, this is going to be a turning point for me. And I have to make a decision that will affect the rest of my life. Like, it could be a helpful way of thinking for them, just not in terms of history.